Okay, so in this video, I'm going to talk through the different viewing options for your Snowscope probe profiles. So first thing, as you take profiles, they're going to come across to the Snowscope app and show up in this list view. So you can see all your profiles that come across in a list. If you want to see a profile in more detail, tap on it, and you'll see that full profile plotted on a hand hardness equivalence scale. So the profile is actually showing, it's measuring hardness in pressure that's coming against the tip as you probe. We've correlated that to a hand hardness equivalent, just so it's a bit easier to understand if you're familiar with the hardness of hand hardness from manual pits. Next thing you'll notice is that the profile is quite detailed. It's quite jagged here, which is pretty different than what you'd see in a normal hand hardness profile. The reason for this is because the probe outputs a data point every millimeter of depth, and so it's picking up really fine fluctuations in the snow hardness. For a lot of use cases, that isn't really relevant to see, and so we have the slider on the bottom here that goes from fine to smooth, and if you slide that, it'll suppress some of those smaller fluctuations and transitions while trying to preserve the big hardness changes. So the idea here is that we're trying to preserve steep changes like crusts or thin weak layers while suppressing some of those little changes that you probably don't care about as much. Next thing you might notice on this view is that there's a whole list of profiles underneath it here. So as you probe, and if you do a couple probes in the same location, it's going to auto group them together into a group. So I'm viewing a group here, and there'll be multiple profiles in this group. If I want to view data from different profiles from this group, I can just tap on different profiles here. And then I can also, if I long press and hold, I can overlay these profiles on top of each other to see how similar they are. Next thing you're able to do is there's different viewing settings. So if you go to the top right button here, bring up the menu, tap settings, you can change how the profile is displayed. So you can change if your axis is on the right as it was before or on the left. So now the data is coming from the left. You can change how the depth is shown, whether it's height or depth, so 0 at the surface or 0 at the ground. You can change between hand hardness and kilopascals. So as I said before, we're actually measuring a pressure resistance, so force over the area of that tip. Force divided by area is pressure. Kilopascal is a measure of pressure. So this is a little bit more sciencey, but basically this is the raw pressure numbers that the probe is reading. So for a lot of scientific applications, you might care more about this. For more practitioner applications, you might want to view it in the hand hardness equivalent scale. And then last, you can choose to plot it on a linear or semi-log scale. So hand hardness is by its nature a semi-logarithmic scale. And what that means is each step in hand hardness from fist to forefinger to 1F, you're not linearly increasing hardness. You are increasing hardness kind of exponentially. And so when you're plotting it semi-log, as this is shown, basically means that we're plotting from fist to forefinger, and forefinger to 1F is the same distance on the plot, but that's not a linear measurement of force. So if I go to linear here, fist is closer to forefinger than one finger is to pen, meaning the difference between one finger and pen is actually quite a bit larger in hardness than the difference between fist and forefinger. So this is it shown linearly, and this is it shown semi-log. Most people prefer semi-log, I'd say, as it kind of is a more normal way to view manual hardness profiles. Okay, so that's kind of, or like last bit about this is you have your profile information here, and then if you scroll down, you can see more info about where this profile was recorded on a map, who created it, what organization created it, if there's any extra information recorded with it, maybe some swag, weather conditions, or foot pen, ski pen, surface grain, things like that, comments. Yep. And if you created this, you can hit edit. You can come in here and I could add this information if I wanted to. I could add aspect, slope angle, things like this. Everything's optional, but it's there if you want to add this information. And then I can even come in and add and start to tag layers or test results on here. So if I use this profile as a hardness, as a kind of hardness profile starting point for full snow pit, and I took some test results, I could come in here and add test results to that pit as well. So I'm going to undo that. Or add layers that I tag. If I wanted to, highlight a layer and say what grain I identified at that layer, I could do that as well. Okay, so I'm done editing. I'm going to go back. Next thing you can do on this list view, you might notice, right, you have these grouped profiles. Some people prefer to see all their profiles individually instead of grouped. So if you go to this main menu, click SnowScope Probe, click Profile Grouping Mode, you can swap between auto, manual, and single. So auto automatically groups profiles by time and location when you're creating them, trying to keep ones that were taken at the same time and location in the same group. If you go to single, you can come out here and you're just going to be able to see all your individual profiles by themselves. So this could be nice depending on application if you just want to see individual profiles, but it does make the amount of scrolling through lists and everything much greater. So can be overwhelming. So that's why we default typically to that auto mode where things are thrown into groups. The last option in there is manual. So if you go to manual, this only applies, or this controls how profiles are grouped initially. So you can say, if you go to new, it'll start a new group when you start probing, and then it will swap to same, meaning that if you took one probe, it'll force the next profiles into that same group until you hit new again. This can be useful if you want to explicitly control how your profiles are grouped together, as grouping can only be controlled when you're creating the profiles. Afterwards, the only thing you can do is view it single or in the group. You can't actually change what profiles are grouped into what group. And then finally, you can see all of this on a map too. So you can see your profiles on a map in the same way as you could on the list. And this is all basically the same on the web app as well. So if you took profiles on your phone, you can pull up the web app on your computer and you can see all this data and interact with it in the same way.